Hi, I'm Chap Bettis, author of The Disciple Making Parent, and this is my audio blog, where I read some of my blog posts in audio format for your convenience. In today's episode, I'm going to be reading the blog post, Help, I'm an Angry Parent. It was posted on the TGC website. It's embarrassing, shame-inducing, and stress-relieving all at the same time. It's rarely talked about or confessed in small groups, but it's prevalent in almost every home. Angry parents. You may have once fancied yourself a patient person. That is, until you started having children. Whether the constant physical demands of little ones, the continual testing of the middle ones, or the perplexing reactions of the teen, children press us in new ways. God has uniquely positioned children to shine a floodlight on the true state of our hearts. And often it's not pretty. We use words with an intensity that surprises and frightens us. As a father of 4 young children and later of 4 teens, I remember thinking, wait, God commands me not to exasperate them? Shouldn't it be the other way around? By God's grace, after searching the scriptures in desperation to change, I found some help that allowed me to grow in patience. The following 3 truths are meant to help parents with anger in the normal range. They are not intended for a potentially abusive situation. For that, seek immediate help from spiritual and legal authorities. But what were these 3 key truths? Number 1, I need to see what anger actually is. David Powlison's definition of anger has helped me. It's an active stance you take to oppose something you assess as important and wrong. Let me read that again. It's so important. An active stance you take to oppose something you assess as important and wrong. Note that anger is active. It springs from our desires. It's a response to act against something that we believe is important and that we believe is wrong. This helps us understand one reason why God's anger is righteous and why Jesus was livid with the Pharisees. He alone perfectly understands and defines what is important and wrong. It also explains why God commands his people, in your anger, do not sin. That's found in Ephesians 4:26. In your anger, do not sin. While some anger may not itself be sinful, it is uniquely positioned to cause us to sin. Indeed, Scripture is filled with commands that help us see how anger is usually filled with sin. And that brings us to our second idea. But our first point is this. Our first truth is this. We need to see what anger actually is. Number 2, we need to see anger as our foe. You need to see anger as your foe. Sinful anger is an enemy. Jesus taught that sinful anger is miniature murder. You can find that in Matthew 5:21 and 22. Sinful anger grieves the Spirit, Ephesians 4:30. Sinful anger is driven by the flesh, Galatians 5:20. It will not fix the problem, James 1:20 tells us, and it actually injures the other person, Proverbs 12:18. As Ed Welch observes, to be angry is to destroy. My anger destroys the peace of my child, the trust of my child, and my testimony to her as a follower of Christ. As a parent, it's easy to justify my anger as righteous or to move on quickly after a blow-up. But sinful anger is a deadly foe I must daily slay by the Spirit's help. If that's our only thinking, though, we're setting ourselves up for failure because we're not understanding the whole of Scripture. It often takes 2 statements to provide a balanced view of what the Scripture says. So, while the second truth is we need to see anger as your foe, the third truth is we need to see anger as our friend. I just said anger was your foe, but if understood correctly, some anger can also be your friend. To reference our definition again, it's an indicator that something is important and wrong. It's an emotion that God's given us, but it's meant to attack a problem, not a person. Godly parenting is not a placid, Zen-like trance. A father who watches his teenage son talk back to his mother and has no reaction reveals his own deficiency. The mother who's oblivious while her 6-year-old hits a younger child, she's not honoring Christ. But rather than blowing up in the moment, though, let that anger motivate you to ask, what problem is this anger pointing me to, and what is important, and what is wrong? You see, we often quote James 4, 1-2, which tells us that fights come from the desires that battle within us. And that passage helps us drill down to examine when our desires have become idolatrous demands. But not all our parental desires are sinful. There are good ones. Our daughter should obey us. Our son should have done his homework. God calls parents to train and disciple their children, which means that they need our correction at times. In fact, if we don't provide any consequences for the disobedient daughter or the lax son, we're negligent in our parental duties. Perhaps looking back at the angry moment, our desire did morph into a demand. But the desire itself was not the problem. Wise parents let upset feelings motivate them to come up with a solution to the problem. In the 1990s, I was a programmer for a bank. In those pre-internet days, and yes, there was a life before the internet, I might receive a call in the middle of the night about a problem. And when that happened, I took 2 steps. One was to fix the problem so that the bank could open in the morning, but the second step occurred the next morning. I would review what had happened and then come up with a solution that would prevent me getting a call in the future. I assumed the problem would happen again, and so I used the time to review the operations. In a similar manner, assuming our desire is good, say obedience or responsibility, then the upset is indicative of something that needs to change. Perhaps it's in me, maybe in my kids, or maybe in my home management. God calls all of us, men and women, to manage our households well. Anger has often prompted me both to address a situation and also to come up with a plan as I lead my household. The Lord and my children have graciously overlooked much sin on my part. And until Jesus returns, our home life will be messy. Mine certainly was. But we can and should make progress in becoming like Jesus. Our children are little sanctification machines, providentially sent to us. And by God's grace, we can grow in defeating sinful anger, becoming more patient disciplers in our home. Thank you for listening to the Disciple Making Parent audio blog. This post is really an overview or an introduction to the material found in our video course, Parenting with Patience. It's our 5-week video-driven Bible study on overcoming anger in the home. You can find more information on our website or at parentingwithpatiencestudy.com. Thanks for listening.